Welcome to the Crawlcast. I'm your host, George Krawczyk, and this is what happened in Week 7 of the NFL season. And if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button like it owes you money. Now let's get started. The first game was the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Bengals won 33-31. So the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals won 33-31. The Bengals' leading passer was Joe Flacco, who had 342 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Chase Brown, who had 108 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Ja'Marr Chase, who had 61 receiving yards and a touchdown. For the Steelers, their leading passer was Aaron Rodgers, who had 249 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Their leading rusher was Jaylen Warren, who had 127 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Pat Freiermuth, who had 111 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. So this game was a heck of a game, and people kept talking about, the two old guys, Aaron Rodgers and Joe Flacco. No, they were talking about the wrong two old guys. The two old guys that everyone should have been talking about were Jalen Ramsey and Darius Slay. Jalen Ramsey at 30 and Darius Slay at 34. Man, they played absolutely horrible. So let me start with both offenses. So both offenses played excellent. Aaron Rodgers had an amazing game, other than he had one really bad interception, which I don't really know what he was seeing. He just kind of threw it right to the defense, and then his second interception wasn't his fault. He had a perfectly thrown ball right to DK Metcalf, and DK Metcalf caught it, and then as he was like falling down, the defenders like stripped it from him to the point where I would even argue that that could have been a DK fumble as opposed to an Aaron Rodgers interception. But so overall, great game by Aaron Rodgers. And then Joe Flacco, and also an amazing, amazing game. And it's tough to where credit goes because number one, the Steelers offense played really, really great. But the Cincinnati Bengals defense is absolutely horrible. And then the Bengals offense played great, but the Steelers defense, I don't know what you have with the Steelers defense. That is insane to me because if you look at them, where week 1, Justin Fields put up like 42 points on them. He looked amazing. And then now we look at Justin Fields. Everyone's talking about should he be benched? And he might be benched. And so that's like just such a traverse trajectory where this Steelers defense is expected to be one of the best defenses in the league. And they're like, okay, as long as Aaron Rodgers can play better than like Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph and Russell Wilson, then the Steelers should be fine. But Aaron Rodgers is playing way better than those guys, and the defense is just absolutely collapsing. And then Joe Flacco, I think he does deserve a lot of credit for playing amazing, but here's the big thing. It felt like, so Ja'Marr Chase had 16 receptions, which is insane. And it felt like all of those was just out routes. They threw like 30 out routes to Ja'Marr Chase, and it felt like he was open every single time. And like I get it that you're gonna drop a few passes here and there, but the drops do concern me a little bit about Ja'Marr Chase because he did have like 4 drops and like 3 of his catches he bobbled it quite a bit before getting a hold of the ball. But overall, Ja'Marr Chase fantastic game. And then the Steelers defense. That is definitely cause for concern because they looked horrible in the first like week, and then the next 2 weeks they kind of figured it, or the next 3 weeks they kind of figured out like, okay, week 1 against Justin Fields was just kind of an outlier game. I don't know if they weren't prepared or what's going on. It looks like that now they're back, but they're not. The Bengals O line, which is terrible, I'd say largely held up. It is also tough because literally it felt like just like with the Packers game, um, Joe Flacco was just throwing up to Ja'Marr Chase every single play, and Ja'Marr Chase was just winning every single play because the corners were not good enough to guard him. And then, so like I said, it's hard to say. It's like, yes, Joe Flacco played well, and he does deserve a lot of credit for that. But also, it felt like the Steelers defense was just playing that bad, and Ja'Marr Chase was open every single play. And that is just horrendous defense. Again, both by Darius Slay and Jalen Ramsey played absolutely horrible. And like like I said, those are the kind of the two old guys that decided this game. And then right at the end, Aaron Rodgers went for a Hail Mary. And I just found this interesting where he threw it like 65 yards, maybe 70 yards up in the air, and it went up and it came down, and DK had a shot at it. What happened is DK Metcalf kind of jumped a little too early, so he was kind of like coming down on his jump as the ball was arriving. That allowed the Bengals to like bat the ball down. but he had a shot, and that would have just been amazing if Aaron Rodgers could could have done that again. So overall in this game, you got to be happy if you're the Bengals. Again, I think this is more of an outlier. I think once you start because again, keep in mind the Packers and the Steelers. The Packers really don't have any great corners, and then with the Steelers, I think Joey Porter is a good corner. Jalen Ramsey, I think he's okay. He has some decent games, but overall, I don't think he's the best anymore. And so I don't think they've had sufficient kind of competition where you say, oh, that is an insane corner that'll shut down Jamar Chase. So overall, the Bengals played great. You gotta be happy because Joe Flacco may be able to lead your team to the playoffs. Because that's the interesting thing about uh, about the AFC is there's a lot of really bad teams in the AFC. So there's a shot that a team could make it being like 8-9 or 9-8. So that the Bengals are definitely still in it. It's just that if I had to take a guess, I would say this is probably a little bit more fluky, and I think eventually we will probably see a Joe Flacco collapse, just like he did in Cleveland, where he was playing fairly decent, and then coming to this year, he kind of just collapsed and played horrible. And then the Steelers, you gotta be happy with your offense because your offense is looking great, but man, the defense is just absolutely collapsing and playing horrible, and I don't really know how to solve that, but you just gotta fix it, and the defense overall just needs to play better. But this is just an exciting game, and the Bengals surprisingly won. They definitely kept it interesting, but the Steelers defense definitely needs to play better. And again, credit to Joe Flacco and Aaron Rodgers because both of them played really excellent tonight. The next game is the Los Angeles Rams versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Rams won 35-7. So you had the Los Angeles Rams versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Rams won 35-7. The Rams' leading passer was Matthew Stafford, who threw for 182 yards and 5 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Kyren Williams, who had 54 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Colby Parkinson, who had 47 receiving yards. And then for the Jaguars, their leading passer was Trevor Lawrence, who had 296 yards and 1 touchdown. Their leading rusher was Travis Etienne, who had 44 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Travis Hunter, who had 101 receiving yards and a touchdown. So this game, the Rams just basically couldn't be stopped by the Jaguars. And I think this game kind of went how it should have gone. And the Jaguars aren't a very good team. I think they're kind of like the biggest frauds in the NFL, where it's like they have more wins than they deserve. I think them and then the Panthers are the two teams where it's like, okay, I get it, you have a decent amount of wins, but you're not really deserving of them. And I don't believe in Trevor Lawrence. He didn't play that great. And then it's weird. Him and Brian Thomas Jr. have just been off the entire season, and I don't know what's up with that, and I don't know how they can fix that because he was good his rookie year. It's just that Brian Thomas Jr. is just struggling now. And then with the Rams, they look great. Davante Adams had a weird stat line with 35 yards but 3 touchdowns. And then Matthew Stafford, I think he's in MVP conversations right now. Since Baker Mayfield just lost and played absolutely horrible, I think that right now it's Matthew Stafford and Dak Prescott are probably the top 2 in the MVP conversation, at least in my opinion. And overall, the Rams played really well, and they kind of did what they should. Is they should have beat the Jaguars, and they did. And so you gotta be happy if you're the Rams, and then the Jaguars. Like, I don't know. I just don't think the Jaguars are that good. They're definitely playing better than I expected them to, but I just don't think they're that great. The next game is the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Minnesota Vikings, and the Eagles won 28-22. So the Eagles won 28-22. The Eagles' leading passer was Jalen Hurts, who threw for 326 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Saquon Barkley, who had 44 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Devonta Smith, who had 183 receiving yards and a touchdown. For the Vikings, their leading passer was Carson Wentz, who had 313 yards and 2 interceptions. Their leading rusher was Jordan Mason, who had 57 rushing yards and a touchdown, and their leading receiver was Jordan Addison, who had 128 receiving yards. So in this game, Jalen Hurts looked really really good. And honestly, I think this is probably the first game this year where he's actually looked really good. Like all the other games, it feels like it's either the defense or just the other team collapsing, which led to the Eagles' victories. Whereas this game, it felt like Jalen Hurts took the reins and really just played excellent. And quite frankly, I think this is what the Eagles needed because the Eagles are kind of collapsing. They started out amazing, then they lost 2 in a row, and I just don't think they could have afforded 3 in a row. There was one really weird point where TJ Hawkinson seemed like he scored a touchdown, but then the refs reversed it. And I was just a bit odd. I think he probably scored it, but anyways, just the Eagles looked good, and they needed this because, again, they couldn't afford to lose 3 in a row and then face the Giants again. Like, plain and simple, the Eagles needed this, and Jalen Hurts showed out and played well. There is a lot of cause for concern for me with Saquon Barkley because he hasn't looked that great this year, but overall, the Eagles looked really, really good. And then the Vikings. Carson Wentz really didn't play that great, and I am curious what they're going to do at quarterback because overall, I think Carson Wentz is still probably the better option if the Vikings want to make the playoffs because it's JJ McCarthy. Granted, he's only played 2 games, but in those 2 games, in the first game, he looked like the worst quarterback in the NFL for the first 3 quarters and then looked fantastic in the fourth quarter. And then in the second game, he just looked horrible the entire game. So I think at this point, stick with Carson Wentz until he has another bad game. Like if Carson Wentz just plays horrible next week, then I'd say bench Carson Wentz for JJ McCarthy. But right now, I think he's still probably the best shot if the Vikings are still aiming to make the playoffs, which they should. 3-3 isn't a terrible record. You're still in it. So overall, a lot of cause for concern for the Vikings offense, and then the Eagles. Like I said, they really, really needed this. They couldn't afford to lose another one. The next game is the New England Patriots versus the Tennessee Titans, and the Patriots won 31-13. So the Patriots won 31-13. The Patriots' leading passer was Drake May, who threw for 222 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Ramondre Stevenson, who had 88 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Stephon Diggs, who had 69 receiving yards. For the Titans, their leading passer was Cam Ward, who had 255 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Their leading rusher was Tajay Spears, who had 22 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Shamari Dyke, who had 70 receiving yards and a touchdown. So in this game, it kind of went exactly how you expected, where the Patriots are a good team and the Titans aren't. Plain and simple. And Drake May is on a really great run right now. I still wouldn't consider him in the MVP conversation just because I think Stafford and Dak are probably a bit ahead of him still. But Drake May has looked phenomenal the past several games, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. And then the Titans, they're just a disaster. And I don't want to blame Cam Ward, because yes, Cam Ward is not playing good, and yes, Cam Ward is looking bad, and there was one play where he kind of just, dropped the ball. But I hate, because he's a rookie, and everyone around him is also terrible. So I don't necessarily think you can solely blame Cam Ward for this loss and for the season. And I think because, look at Caleb Williams. He didn't look that great last year, and now Ben Johnson's making him look pretty good. Well, granted, we'll get to his game in a minute, but overall, I just feel bad for Cam Ward. I think he's in a terrible situation, and he's playing terrible in a terrible situation. And then Patriots, gotta be happy. Now you're fighting with the Bills for the division. I still think the Bills are probably a better team, but man, the Patriots are going to be able to make this close, and it's going to be interesting how each of them finish. If either Josh Allen or Drake May might have a collapse, or if they're just going to be two of the top teams in the AFC. The next game is the Carolina Panthers versus the New York Jets, and the Panthers won 13-6. So the Panthers won 13-6. The Panthers' leading passer is Bryce Young, who threw for 138 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher is Rico Dowdle, who had 79 rushing yards. And their leading receiver is Xavier Legette, who had 92 receiving yards and a touchdown. And for the Jets, their leading passer is Tyrod Taylor, who had 126 yards and 2 interceptions. Their leading rusher was Breece Hall, who had 38 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Tyler Johnson, who had 60 receiving yards. So in this game, neither of the teams looked good really at all. And that's the thing about the Panthers is they really haven't looked good in a game yet in their wins. Bryce Young is still very concerning. He's looked horrible in basically all his games. And that, again, yes, they keep winning, but they keep looking bad in their wins. And that's why I don't think they're going to go that far and really they shouldn't have as many wins as they do. And I do feel bad for these guys. And hey, maybe it's like the act of God or something like that, or maybe it's just a weird coincidence that there's these guys who run a famous Carolina Panthers podcast, and they're like, this team is so horrible that we cannot do a podcast on the Panthers anymore. And the second their podcast ends, that is when the Panthers start doing amazing. I don't know. That is a weird coincidence. So in this game, man, just neither of these teams look good. The Jets are just a disaster. Like, Justin Fields is looking horrible, and then he was replaced by Tyrod Taylor, who may have looked even worse. And man, because I was thinking maybe Justin Fields should be benched because of how bad he's being. And, Tyrod Taylor can't be much worse than Justin Fields. Maybe Tyrod Taylor is worse than Justin Fields. I would probably give Tyrod Taylor the start next week just to see what you got in him, or maybe like try to trade for a third string quarterback or just something. Like, honestly, the first thought in my head is that now that Quinn Ewers is the backup in Miami, try to trade for Zach Wilson. But then I'm like, that's probably too many bad memories that they don't want Zach Wilson back. And then with the Panthers, at least Xavier Legette, he looked good. This is probably his first good game in the NFL. He's struggled quite a bit. And then Rico Dowdle, like, he's looked very good in the past 3 games. Granted, they're not against the best teams, but he's looked fairly good. And so give a lot of credit to him. So overall, neither of these teams are good, but man, the Jets, I didn't think they'd be good. I thought they were going to be a bad team. I said that. I didn't think Aaron Glenn was going to be that good, but I didn't think they'd be this bad. Just tough for them. The next game is the Miami Dolphins versus the Cleveland Browns, and the Browns won 31-6. So the Browns won 31-6. The Browns' leading passer is Dillon Gabriel, who threw for 116 yards. Their leading rusher is Quinshon Judkins, who had 84 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. And their leading receiver is Harold Fannin Jr., who had 36 receiving yards. For the Dolphins, their leading passer was Tua, who had 100 passing yards and 3 interceptions. Their leading rusher is Devon Achane, who had 82 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Dwayne Eskridge, who had 45 receiving yards. So in this game, like, it's quite ironic to me because of Dillon Gabriel, where this is his first win, but this is probably the worst he's looked. He looked way better against the Vikings and the oh my god, I'm blanking on the other team, but he looked way better against those guys and he lost. And this week, he's just okay and they win. And, like, granted, it's not his fault because they didn't really ask him to do much. Like, they basically relied on Judkins and their defense, and they do have a good defense, but I was kind of expecting a little bit more out of him. But also, yes, I have to keep in mind the weather was horrible. And then the Dolphins, man, they are a disaster. They have not fired Mike McDaniel yet, and I'm going to get into why they might want to keep him, even though I think it's unlikely. So, Tua. He's just playing bad. Like, everything looks off. He's just not reading the right guys. He's throwing bad interceptions. Everything just looks bad. So you may say, why hasn't Mike McDaniel looked bad or gotten fired yet when everyone looks so bad? And I agree. I think he should be fired because I do think he is a good offensive coordinator, but he's completely lost the locker room. The players don't believe in him. People are kind of bringing their dirty laundry and their drama to the public, and you can't have that. So overall, I think he needs to go because you cannot sustain a locker room like that with a head coach like that. But the reason why they might want to keep him is because look at 2 years ago, where with Tua and Mike McDaniel, Tua has overall looked really great. The big issue is just the concussions and the injuries, which aren't anybody's fault, okay? So he just kind of got lucky with bad injuries, but he's looked really good and taken them to the playoffs. Granted, he hasn't started in the playoffs because of injuries, but he's taken them to the playoffs, and they've looked really good. Keep in mind, a couple years ago, they dropped 70 points on the Broncos. And so I think you do have to look at a lot of the good with Mike McDaniel and Tua. But in the past year, the good has seemingly disappeared, and they've looked terrible. And to this point, I don't think the goodwill that he's built up over the past few years has made up for the horribleness of this season. And that is kind of interesting because Quinn Ewers came in. Keep in mind, he was going a projected first-round pick before he had a terrible year last year and then fell to the 7th round. He might have it in him because when he came in for Tua after Tua got benched, he looked pretty good. So I'm not necessarily saying that Tua should be benched, but I think at this point you might want to give Quinn Ewers a shot because he can't play that much worse than Tua. and he might be your guy. Or maybe you just kind of sack off this year and just say, okay, next year, whoever the new head coach is, we can give him Quinn Ewers, we can give him Tua, or we can draft a guy. But I don't know. I understand a little bit of the logic of keeping Mike McDaniel because they did have some really good years under him. But just man, I feel like you just can't sustain this when the locker room is completely collapsing. And then the Browns, Dylan Gabriel looked okay. Again, I think this is his worst game, but he hasn't looked bad yet. And Judkins looked really, really good, relying him on the running ball, and then their defense has been great. So a lot of credit to the Browns here. The next game is the New Orleans Saints versus the Chicago Bears, and the Bears won 26-14. So the Bears won 26-14. The Bears' leading passer is Caleb Williams, who threw for 172 yards and an interception. Their leading rusher is DeAndre Swift, who had 124 yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver is DJ Moore, who had 43 receiving yards. For the Saints, their leading passer is Spencer Rattler, who threw for 233 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Their leading rusher was Alvin Kamara, who had 28 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Chris Olave, who had 98 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. So both these teams kind of played bad in this game. Kind of like the Caleb Williams story is the Bears looked pretty good in like the first quarter and the first half, and then they kind of fell apart a bit after that, where Caleb Williams wasn't asked to do much, but he really didn't play well in the little bit that he was asked to do, and kind of a disappointing game for him because he's been on the upswing. Yes, the Bears got the win, and yes, they're 4-2, which is good, but also keep in mind they're 4-2 last year, and they ended up being, I think, like 5-12, and so overall that's very concerning. But what happened last year, but they are a better team this year, but they just don't seem like the type of team that is ready to win now. I do think they are a decent team. I think Ben Johnson is a good coach, and I think Ben Johnson has the ability to get as much out of Caleb Williams as possible. But overall, I just don't know if they're that team yet this year, especially in a division with the Packers, who are good, the Lions, who are good, and then the Vikings, who aren't very good, but they can be capable. And then the Saints. This is Spencer Rattler's, I think, first really bad game, and kind of I was talking about last video how I thought he's earned an opportunity to be a starting quarterback, and I thought he was going to do well this game, but he did not look good. He did not play well, and I think the Saints are a bad team overall, and I didn't expect many wins, but I do think Spencer Rattler is playing decent enough. But overall, it's kind of like you gotta be happy with the Bears because you have a very good record, even though you're not playing that well. And then the Saints, it's kind of expected them to get all these losses, but I thought with them on the upswing that they'd maybe get a couple more wins. But overall, you gotta be happy if you're the Bears and disappointed if you're the Saints. The next game is the Las Vegas Raiders versus the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Chiefs won 31-0. So the Chiefs won 31-0. The Chiefs' leading passer was Patrick Mahomes, who had 286 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Isaiah Pacheco, who had 57 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Travis Kelce, who had 54 receiving yards. For the Raiders, their leading passer was Geno Smith, who had 67 passing yards. Their leading rusher was Ashton Jeanty, who had 21 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Trey Tucker, who had 33 receiving yards. I don't even know what to say about this game. Quite frankly, this game was just sad. It just felt like the Chiefs just had their way with the Raiders and bullied them into submission. It was just sad. This is a divisional opponent. I know the Chiefs are better and they should have won, and everyone thought they was going to win, but no one thought it was going to be this much of a beating. No one on the Raiders looked good. I don't know if it's time to bench Geno Smith. And then at the end, there was 2.5 minutes left, and the Raiders didn't even use their timeouts. The Chiefs were kneeling the ball out, and then the Chiefs benched all their starters, basically towards the beginning of the third quarter. And man, it was just sad. At least Rashid Rice came back, and he's looking good for the Chiefs, and that's just amazing to me, kind of how that works, where it's him and Henry Ruggs did the exact same actions, and Rashid Rice was just lucky that a couple of people were critically injured and just happens to survive. And so instead of being in prison, he's back on the football field in 6 weeks. So, he got lucky there. But overall, clearly the intent was to get him back into the offense because he's going to be Patrick Mahomes' number one receiver. And now if him, Kelce, and Worthy, I think this could be a very good offense. And then the Raiders, man, they're just a disaster. And like I said, it's one of those things where it's Miami, you look at oh, look, it's Tua, or it's Mike McDaniel, Or with the Jets, you can say maybe it's Justin Fields or Aaron Glenn. Whereas like in this, it's like it's everybody. It's Pete Carroll. It's Geno Smith. It's Genti. It's the O-line. It's the defense. Like it's just a disaster. So look, the Chiefs, you happy with the win, but man, the Raiders. I think it might be time to give Kenny Pickett a shot. I don't think Kenny Pickett is that much better, if at all better than Geno Smith, but I think he just played his way out of the starting position. You got to at least give Kenny Pickett a shot. The next game is the Indianapolis Colts versus the Los Angeles Chargers, and the Colts won 38-24. So the Colts won 38-24. The Colts' leading passer is Daniel Jones, who had 288 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their leading rusher is Jonathan Taylor, who had 94 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. And their leading receiver is Alec Pierce, who had 98 receiving yards. And for the Chargers, their leading passer is Justin Herbert, who had 420 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Their leading rusher is Justin Herbert, who had 31 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Orlando Gadsden, who had 164 receiving yards and a touchdown. So in this game, man, so how do I say this? At the beginning, Justin Herbert looked terrible. He threw 2 horrible picks, and well, one of them wasn't that bad, but he threw 2 picks, and that basically ended the game right there, where Justin Herbert played bad, and the Chargers were too much of in a hole to dig themselves out of. But they tried. They really came back and like nearly got the game close to an upset, like with the Broncos and Giants. We'll get to that one in a minute. But they nearly came back and did it. Justin Herbert looked good, but he needs to clean up his some of his more terrible plays. And then Daniel Jones looked really good. Like, I'm kind of keep waiting for the Daniel Jones collapse, but it just hasn't happened yet. Like, maybe it'll be like Sam Darnold, where he looked really good throughout the regular season, and then the last, like, 2 games, he just absolutely, like, looked horrible. But Daniel Jones has looked great, and I understand they're relying more on Jonathan Taylor than Daniel Jones, but that's fine. Like, look at last year. The Eagles won the Super Bowl relying on Saquon Barkley over Jalen Hurts. So as long as Daniel Jones just plays well enough not to blow it, they should be a good team. And man, I knew the Colts were good. I even said in my like preseason predictions that I thought the Colts were going to be good because they were decent with Anthony Richardson, and Anthony Richardson was like the worst quarterback in football. So I'm like, as long as Daniel Jones plays above Anthony Richardson, then they should be able to be good. But I didn't expect them to be this good, and so overall, just if they keep on rolling, and I'm waiting for the Daniel Jones mistake game or the Daniel Jones collapse game, and it just hasn't happened. And so we'll see if it'll happen soon, but the Colts are just definitely playing way above expectations. And then with the Chargers, their defense is a disaster. Defense absolutely horrible. And then Justin Herbert, the past few weeks, I understand this game, it was more or less the first quarter, but the past few weeks he's played horrible. And then this game, he played really great in the second half, but he just needs to play better. Like in the first 3 weeks, I would say he was probably the MVP of the league, and now he's kind of collapsing and just needs to clean up the stupid mistakes, and then the Chargers would be much better. The next game is the New York Giants versus the Denver Broncos, and the Broncos won 33-32. So the Broncos won 33-32. The Broncos' leading passer was Bo Nix, who threw for 279 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was J.K. Dobbins, who had 81 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Courtland Sutton, who had 87 receiving yards. For the Giants, their leading passer was Jackson Dart, who had 283 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Their leading rusher is Cam Scatabo, who had 60 rushing yards, and their leading receiver is Wan'Dale Robinson, who had 95 receiving yards. So this game was the complete collapse of the Giants. So the Giants were up 19-0 with about 5 minutes left in the game, and like, okay, the game's over. No way Broncos can come back for this. It's done. And they did, and man, it was just horrible. Their kicker, his name is escaping me now, but the Giants kicker missed so many kicks, and just really a disastrous collapse for the Giants. I don't even know how to explain it, where, like, okay, if you take everything other than the final couple of minutes of this game, because this is tough, because this is what I want. I want, like, a game where I can be like, okay, this is what happened during the entire game. But if you look at the first, 55 minutes as opposed to the last 5 minutes, those are 2 completely opposite games. So I'll start with the first 55 minutes because that was the majority of the game. Jackson Dart and this Giants offense looked really good. It felt like ever since Jackson Dart took over from Russell Wilson, this has been a different Giants team. He's looked really good. Scatterbo's looked really good. This Giants team has now turned it around and looked really, really excellent. And against a tough Broncos defense. And then on the flip side, Bo Nix. Bo Nix has looked horrible this season, and that's really surprising me because I thought that Denver's defense was great last year. Bo Nix was pretty good last year, and they're only getting better. And then they've kind of collapsed throughout this season, where the Broncos defense seems about average, and then Bo Nix has just been bad. And then take the last 5 minutes and flip it on its head, where the Broncos defense looked really good. Bo Nix was like perfect, and then the Giants just collapsed. Jackson Dart threw a bad pick. And so I don't know what to take away from this, where majority of the game. So this thing is Jackson Dart is a rookie. The Giants probably not winning the division, probably not making the playoffs. But at least they're showing progress and the team can play well. And then the Broncos. At least you came back and that's good, but Bo Nix is very, very concerning for this season, where he has not looked good, and I'm just nervous about him, where if he can be the future of the franchise, because he looked good his rookie year, and it's like, okay, Bo Nix is the guy. He's really, really good. He was the best quarterback behind Jaden Daniels last year, and now he's just kind of collapsed and really hasn't looked good. And so I'm really nervous about Bo Nix for the future of the franchise. Oh, and I also want to address something that happened after the game. So Dre Greenlaw just got suspended for 1 game because apparently after the game he chased down a ref and threatened him. So I don't know exactly what was said or what was done, but he looked like running down the ref and screaming at him. That, I'm surprised, is only a 1 game suspension, because if he was actually threatening to like assault the ref or something like that, that is completely, completely unacceptable. Like, quite frankly, if he actually did that, then I would suspend him for the rest of the season. Like, that, you cannot have that in the NFL. Like, especially after the game. Like, people understand some things, like, oh, if you're hot and you do something stupid in the heat of the moment, but when the game is over, it is done. If you're frustrated, go back to the locker room. That's what we saw with Brian Branch, where he beat up Juju Smith-Schuster after the game, which was completely unacceptable. So chasing down a ref and threatening to beat him up, if that is indeed what happened, because they just said threaten him, and I don't know exactly what that means and what that entails, but if that is indeed what happened, that is completely unacceptable, and quite frankly, he should be suspended for longer than just 1 game. The next game is the Green Bay Packers versus the Arizona Cardinals, and the Packers won 27-23. So the Packers won 27-23. The Packers' leading passer was Jordan Love, who threw for 179 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher is Josh Jacobs, who rushed for 55 yards and 2 touchdowns. And their leading receiver is Romeo Doubs, who had 72 receiving yards. For the Cardinals, their leading passer is Jacoby Brissett, who threw for 279 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Xavier Knight, who had 57 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Trey McBride, who had 74 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. So in this game, Micah Parsons took over. Micah Parsons looked fantastic. He kind of won them the game. So the Cardinals' defense has been decent this year, and the Packers offense struggled quite a bit, especially at the beginning. But then towards the end, Jordan Love really kind of turned it on and started playing well. And then for the Cardinals, Jacoby Brissett played extremely, extremely well. Like, to the point where I think he's probably better than Kyler Murray at this point, where, like, I'd give him the start next week. Even if Kyler Murray come back healthy, I would say Jacoby Brissett is the starter until he, like, basically plays horrible and loses a job over it. I think he deserves it. Kyler Murray has been playing terrible this year. And then, like I said, the Cardinals played well. So, for the Packers, they're how do I say this? Nate Hobbs played terrible. I'm very concerned about him. So he is their big free agent corner they signed, and the Packers corners are just not good, and that concerns me a lot, because that's what happens is it's either Micah Parsons or Rashawn Gary. Either the pass rush gets there for the sack, or someone's going to be open for a reception because the Packers corners are terrible. And that worries me for the future, is if they start going up against these elite receivers. Like, look at what happened against the Bengals, where they basically did one thing, is they just threw it up to Jamar Chase, and the Packers corners weren't good enough to cover Jamar Chase one-on-one. And so once you go against these elite teams, I'm concerned that the Packers corners aren't good enough to keep up if Micah Parsons or Rashawn Gary has a bad game. And then for the Packers offense, it's just way too inconsistent. Jordan Love needs to play better. Josh Jacobs need to play better, and they're just way too inconsistent. And then the Packers' new kicker, Lucas Harvisick, he set the new Packers franchise record for a 61-yard field goal attempt. That's very funny to me because it feels like, as a person who loves like Packers history and is a part owner of the Packers, it's funny to me that they just have random players that have their records. Like, for example, most passing yards in a game by a Green Bay Packers player. It isn't Hall of Famer Bart Starr. It isn't Hall of Famer Brett Favre. It isn't Hall of Famer Aaron Rodgers. It isn't future of the franchise Jordan Love. No, it is random backup quarterback Matt Flynn. And so, like right here, the record for longest field goal by a Packers in history, not franchise legend Mason Crosby. It's Lucas Harvisick, who might not even be the kicker of the future. I don't know, because Brandon McManus has been really good, and he's injured right now. And then Lucas Harvisick has looked really good. On Lucas's favor, he is quite younger than Brandon McManus, but Brandon McManus just signed a huge new deal for a kicker. So it's on the flip side where it's funny. A couple of years ago, where the Packers couldn't find a kicker and were struggling, and now they have two really good kickers. I'd probably still stick with McManus because even though he is older, he has throughout his career been more consistent than Harvisick, so I would choose McManus. But that's a good situation to have go from 0 kickers to 2 kickers. So Packers, you gotta be happy with a win, but I do think there's quite a bit cause for concern where they're struggling. Like, they put a complete game together against the Lions and the Commanders, but overall they've been struggling to kind of both sides of the ball and playing complete games together. And then the Cardinals, man, their record doesn't reflect their play. Like, they should have beaten the Titans and they collapsed there, and they've largely played well against some good teams, and they just been barely losing. So I feel bad for them, but overall, you gotta be happy with the Packers. And the Cardinals, they're kind of the reverse of the Panthers, where it's like Panthers play horrible every week, but they win, and then the Cardinals play well every week and they lose. The next game is the Washington Commanders versus the Dallas Cowboys, and the Cowboys won 44-22. So the Cowboys won 44-22. The Cowboys' leading passer is Dak Prescott, who threw for 264 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their leading rusher is Javonte Williams, who had 116 yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver is CeeDee Lamb, who had 110 yards and a touchdown. For the Commanders, their leading passer is Jayden Daniels, who had 156 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher is Jayden Daniels, who had 35 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Jalen Lane, who had 60 receiving yards. So in this game, the Cowboys' offense looked really, really good and tore apart this Commanders' defense. And then on the flip side for the Commanders, Jayden Daniels has really not looked good at all this season. He had a bad fumble in this game, and he just hasn't looked good. And then the big story is he did get injured. He injured his hamstring, so I don't know if he's going to be missed multiple weeks, because this is his first game back in 2 weeks, if I remember correctly, because of his hamstring injury. And then Marcus Mariota, he came in and he struggled. He did not play well. And this is really the first game where it felt like the Cowboys defense did play really well. And that gives me some concern for the Commanders, because Marcus Mariota has stepped in and played well for Jayden Daniels. In one game, I'd argue he played better than Jayden Daniels. And so, again, we still have a long ways to go for Jayden Daniels' remainder of his career, but by no means is he the franchise guy for the Commanders, because he had a really good rookie year, and then this year he hasn't looked good. Kind of reminds me of C.J. Stroud, where C.J. Stroud had an excellent rookie year, and then has looked terrible ever since. And so I am concerned about the Commanders. I don't know if they are a playoff team after making the NFC Championship last year. Their defense is struggling. Granted, it's against a great Cowboys offense. And then the Cowboys offense. It was really good without CeeDee Lamb, and now with their number one receiver back, it is only getting better. The defense does still concern me, and that is, I know I say this, it feels like every video, but that is why I think it was a huge mistake to get rid of Micah Parsons, because it feels like they're missing a Micah Parsons type player to make their defense well. Their defense play good, and they probably have the best offense in the NFL, and it's just that their defense is constantly letting them down. And Dak, I told you, is up for MVP in the league. I think he should have won it 2 years ago instead of Lamar. I know I got a lot of hate for that, but I said that. And Dak is just playing extremely, extremely well, and so the Cowboys are going to be interesting, because I think they can probably be a playoff team, but it's going to be really close and really tough, especially if the Eagles involved. The next game is the Atlanta Falcons versus the San Francisco 49ers, and the 49ers won 20-10. So the 49ers won 20-10. The 49ers leading passer is Mac Jones, who had 152 yards and an interception. Their leading rusher is Christian McCaffrey, who had 129 yards and 2 touchdowns. And their leading receiver is Christian McCaffrey, who had 72 receiving yards. For the Falcons, their leading passer is Michael Penix Jr., who had 241 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher is Bijan Robinson, who had 40 rushing yards. And their leading receiver is Darnell Mooney, who had 68 receiving yards. So in this game, this just doesn't make sense to me. Where, like, you have the 49ers who are so beat up and so injured, and you expect them not to be good, and then they somehow just keep winning. And then the Falcons, like, every single week, it's like they're either the worst team or the best team, where they got completely destroyed by the Panthers. And then they come out, and this Bills team, which are excellent, they completely shut down Josh Allen. They completely shut down the Bills. Bijan looks dominant. Penix Jr. looks dominant. And then they go up against the 49ers backups who are injured, and they struggle. Like, so I have no idea what this is. I can't explain it. Where, like, I understand the offense is run through Bijan, and if you can stop Bijan, then the game's over, because Michael Penix Jr. is not good enough to win the game on his own without Bijan. Kind of reminds me of the Eagles last year, where it's like the few games that Saquon Barkley was stopped, the Eagles lost because Jalen Hurts kind of struggled to make up for it on his own in the Eagles offense. But man, I just don't get the Falcons. They're either the best team or the worst team every single week, and it makes no sense. And then this game, Christian McCaffrey basically took over. Like, a lot of credit to Christian McCaffrey. He looks back. He's looked good all year, and he is the guy. And, like, obviously you have injury concerns, but basically Mac Jones didn't play well. The offense didn't play well. The defense played great, and then, like I said, Christian McCaffrey, he won them this game. So, a lot of credit to McCaffrey, and these two teams are just, I don't understand them. It makes no sense to me. The 49ers feel like they should be worse than they are with all their injuries, and then the Falcons, they keep playing amazing and horrible, whereas, like, and it also looks like Bijan is injured and probably going to miss next week, so it'll be interesting if Kirk Cousins starts, not Bijan, Michael Penix Jr., but, man, I don't get it. I can't explain these two teams. It makes no sense to me. The next game is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Detroit Lions, and the Lions won 24-9. So the Lions won 24-9. The Lions' leading passer is Jared Goff, who threw for 241 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. The Lions' leading rusher is Jahmyr Gibbs, who had 136 yards and 2 touchdowns. And their leading receiver is Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had 86 receiving yards and a touchdown. For the Buccaneers, their leading passer is Baker Mayfield, who had 228 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Their leading rusher was Rachaad White, who had 38 rushing yards. And their leading receiver is Cade Otton, who had 65 receiving yards. So a couple of things to address in this game. Number one, the refs were absolutely terrible, and the Buccaneers had some horrible, horrible calls. So the first one, Cade Otton, what happens is he, like, kind of catches the ball, like, on his shoulder, and so he has the ball on his shoulder, and as he's kind of going towards the ground, a Lions defender kind of put his hands on it, and then once they hit the ground, it looked like they both had it. Personally, I think Cade Otton should have gotten the ball, and it should have been a reception, because it looked like he had control of the ball as he was going to the ground. And then when they hit the ground, I don't think it was definitive that the Lions defender, like, stripped control of the ball away from Cade Otton. That's just my opinion on it. And then at one point, the Lions challenged a completed catch, because there was one where Cade Otton caught the ball and he, like, fell to the ground and reached for the first down, okay? And so the refs then convened and said the catch was a completion and the Lions failed their challenge. And then after a couple minutes later, the refs, like, convened again and then said that the spot was short and the Lions get their challenge back. Number one, I think that is a little bit weird that basically they review the play, asked them for the review, said that the Lions were wrong on the review, and then kind of reversed themselves. And I also didn't think Cade Otton was short. He looked like he got the first down to me, but that was just a very, very weird and unique situation that I can't remember the last time I've seen that. And then at the end, the game-winning sack was clearly a tripping call. I don't necessarily have an issue with that not being called, because personally I hate tripping calls, because I feel like if you're a defender, if you can get the guy down any way possible, then you should be able to stick out your leg and trip him to get him down. That's just my opinion on it. So, but here's the big thing. I don't think the penalties made much of a difference. I don't think it really mattered, because Baker Mayfield, he played bad. It felt like every single one of his passes were about 2 yards too high, and I can't explain it. Just everything was overthrown. Aiden Hutchinson, it feels like he won the Lions the game. He absolutely destroyed the Buccaneers offense or offensive line and was in Baker Mayfield's face the entire game. And then um at the end, like you have to give huge credit to the Lions defenders. So this was kind of the game of the backup wide receivers versus the backup corners. And I thought the backup receivers would win because they're a little bit better, but I was wrong. The backups corners played amazing. And quite frankly, I don't think it's much of a downgrade because DJ Reed, missing him, I think he was playing excellent. He was playing really good for the Lions, so he's a huge loss. But Terrion Arnold, he was not playing good. And I think if everything was fair, Terrion Arnold would not be playing. But since he was a first round pick, he's kind of forced into that spot to try to get their return on investment for the Lions. So I don't think it was much of a downgrade from Terrion Arnold. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, he played absolutely excellent. And just overall, Baker Mayfield struggled and played bad. Mike Evans, he came back, but he left the game very, very early because he broke his collarbone. And this is kind of unfortunate. He is out for the remainder of the season. And that's just sad for him. So his streak of 1,000 yards every season is coming to an end. And that's very unfortunate because I thought that was a really cool streak going. And then the Lions, I just have to say, this kind of I didn't like. So all the defensive backs before the game and after the game were wearing Brian Branch jerseys and like support of him. And I'm like, why? Because it's not like something bad happened to him or he was like unjustly suspended or something like that. He beat up Juju Smith-Schuster after the game. He should have been suspended. He deserved it. Like that reminds me of like when the Chiefs players were wearing like free Rashid Rice t-shirts. Like, no, he got in a car accident, caused a pile up, injured people, and got suspended. Like, why are you saying free Rashid Rice? Like he deserved his suspension. Like the it kind of reminds me of the time where it's like the Bills were wearing Damar Hamlin t-shirts to honor him, and it's like, yeah, the guy almost died on a football field, so you're honoring him, whereas these guys were justly suspended, and you're trying to like honor them. That was just very weird to me. So overall, the Lions, you got to be happy because even though the Packers are ahead, they did get the win, and then the Buccaneers, they're dealing with a lot of injuries, and this Buccaneers team today felt like what the 49ers should have been the entire season, where the Buccaneers injuries kind of got to them, and they struggled with it. And and Baker Mayfield just didn't play well. I don't necessarily think he's out of the MVP race just yet because almost everyone has one bad game at least, but he struggled a lot. So the Lions looked really, really good, and then the Buccaneers struggled, and Baker Mayfield didn't play well, and so that was it. The final game is the Houston Texans versus the Seattle Seahawks, and the Seahawks won 27-19. So the Seahawks won 27-19. The Seahawks' leading passer was Sam Darnold, who threw for 213 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Their leading rusher was Kenneth Walker, who had 66 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Jackson Smith-Njigba, who had 123 yards and a touchdown. For the Texans, their leading passer was C.J. Stroud, who had 229 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Their leading rusher was C.J. Stroud, who had 25 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Dalton Schultz, who had 98 receiving yards. So in this game, the Seahawks dominated for basically the entire game, and then right at the end, they tried to blow it. Like, in the first half, Sam Darnold was perfect. He played so incredibly well. And then in the second half, he got sacked, fumbled the ball for a touchdown, he threw a horrible interception, and then another player fumbled. It was really bad in the second half. And then in the Texans, they came back close to the end, but it was a pretty sad game. Like, C.J. Stroud, he looked lost. He looked like he was under pressure the entire time because the Texans' offensive line played so horrible. It was just a very, very bad game for C.J. Stroud and the Texans. And I hate to say, like, I don't know, because C.J. Stroud hasn't looked good, but his offensive line has really let him down. And I was thinking, like, oh, maybe the Seahawks defense will take care of him, but this was mostly just, like, an upset that I thought was going to happen. And it was just bad. Like, I don't know. The Seahawks took care of business. They are a much better team. They should win, but these late game kind of stupid mistakes, they can't just have those happening. And then the Texans, they're a disaster. Like, their defense is pretty good. Their offense and C.J. Stroud just really letting them down. And that's what made me be really surprised when they traded Laramie Tunsil, because their offensive line is the worst part of the team last year, and then they decided to make it worse. Like, I don't understand the logic there, and it just doesn't make sense to me. So that overall, Seahawks did what they did, and they did what they should have, and the Texans just seem like they're on a disaster course right now. So that's what happened in Week 7 of the NFL season. Let me know your thoughts and comments below, what teams and players you like. And if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button like it owes you money, and I'll see you on the next one.